Hi, welcome to Havilah's podcast. I'm your host, Havilah Cunnington, and I'm so excited that you're here for this month because March is all about marriage. We're talking about this beautiful, crazy, sometimes hard, other times really exciting season of our lives in the sense of like the relationship of marriage. It's a big deal. My husband and I are celebrating almost 20 years of marriage. I always say we've been married for almost 20 years, happily married for 15. So it's been a journey. But I've also watched my parents who are celebrating their 50th this year. It's been both very exciting to watch somebody have longevity in their marriage, but also kind of deflating to watch them argue over the same things that my husband and I are arguing over for 20 years. I'm like, oh, the next 30. Thanks, Mom and Dad. But anyway, I hope that you will find strength in this episode. And I hope that you will find courage and just hope that wherever you are, that it may not be over like you think it is, or it may actually, you might be able to make it a little easier if you do a few things and make a few choices. So I'm really glad you're here. And listen, if you're not married, this is the best time to listen to something like this, because sometimes it's hard to learn how to raise a kid when you are trying to like feed a kid and, care for a kid. It's much better to get educated beforehand. So I'm really glad you're here. And most importantly, I'm thrilled to have not only my best friends, but also some of the people in my life that I think are experts on this topic of marriage and relationships. So today at the table, I have Jason and Lauren Vallotton. I am thrilled that you guys are here. You are like the top of my list when it comes to marriage. I'm like, let's get Jason and Lauren at the table. I didn't think I could get you guys here, to be honest. Not that you wouldn't do it for me, but
easy.
I know you guys have big lives and you have a lot going on. And I know that you run marriage intensives and you do a lot of things with marriages. So maybe we just start with like who you are for those that don't know.
Sure.
Maybe who you are, your child status and all the things, and then why you guys would be on a podcast on marriage.
Yeah. You want me to go?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we're Jason and Lauren.
Yes.
We've been married for coming up on 14 years. I count the halves, like 13 and a half
14
years.
years.
It'll be
That's a long
14 in
time.
June. Isn't that wild?
Yes.
Yeah, I know. Wild. So, probably the unique facets of our story is that when we got married in 2011, Jason had previously been married for 10 years and had 3 children from his first marriage. And so, getting married to Jay meant becoming a stepmom of 3. So we've been doing marriage and parenthood since day one. It's like so simple. It's just really easy,
Absolutely.
And then after a long season of infertility, we had 2 more babies, and they are in March this year, they are 5 and 3. So wild. Yeah. So that's our marriage and kid status.
We have kids from 25 years old all the way down to 3
It's true. And the wildest, most exciting new news in our world is that our oldest son, Elijah, and his wife are actually expecting a baby at the end of August.
So it's so exciting.
Grandma
will be,
and Grandpa.
we'll be parents of toddlers and grandparents at the same time.
That is wild. And you don't even look like the grandparent status is going to be like, we have the coolest, youngest grandparents on the face of the earth.
I know. I'm just glad I'll be 40 by the time the baby comes. Like, I feel like that brings a level of legitimacy to the situation. Otherwise, it just looks dysfunctional.
It's real.
That's right. The Father of the Bride 2 is like, we all were raised in that rom-com, so it feels very appropriate.
Yeah.
I love it. And then you guys are both pastors and leaders at our church, Bethel Church. But how did you guys always major on marriage, or is that something that came
Yeah.
I've been on staff for 20 years at Bethel, and my main thing that I do there is oversee the transformation center, so our counseling departments, and then the emotional health departments at the church as well. And so marriage has been like a huge passion point in my life, especially with my first marriage ending, honestly. So going through a divorce, watching what happens to families who go through a divorce. And so emotional health has been something on my heart since I've been honestly a young boy. And so we started doing marriage intensives 3 years ago, 2.5 years ago.
I think so. For a long time when we were on staff, we're still work for the church, but for a long time we ran the pre-marriage course at our church. And so we both have kind of a shared passion for emotional health and relational health. That's just like a passion point and an interest. And then, working hard to solidify good family culture in those early years of our blended family life. I think we just learned a lot. And so teaching the pre-marriage class was amazing and really fun because we got to go, well, gosh, if you can get couples to walk in health and have like highly functional relational lives before marriage, then their married lives are going to be that much simpler and easier. And then from that space kind of moved into helping married couples through hard stuff and easy stuff, laying good, healthy foundations. But yeah, we've been leading the marriage intensives for a few years. We usually run 2 or 3 a year.
Yeah.
Our marriage story is so unique in the sense that I've been married before, and then the you coming in as stepmom, and then our infertility journey, and just all of it. So
it's been intense.
Yeah.
I mean, I read your book, Supernatural Power of Forgiveness, and cried through portions of it. It was very powerful. You know, when you go through the ending of a marriage that you didn't choose, but yet also have to rebuild and have hope for the future. Then I get to sit with your, you know, wife for, gosh, almost 9 years, you know, at the table, and watched her journey through becoming a parent, to watching them go through teen years, to going through infertility, to having the miracle baby and then another miracle baby, and then watching you have a passion for men, and then just watching it. I think it's very easy for people to intellectually think marriage and like, here's some tips and here's some tools, but to watch both of you like get in it and just go, we're going to figure this thing out, like whatever it takes. Like, I'm not going to duplicate what happened, although I had very little control over a lot of it. I'm not going to, you know, project what I hoped it would be, but rather like like take what is and begin to make it beautiful. Like, I watch you just, I think with authenticity, both of you just like go, we're going to do this. And it's beautiful. But what I know is the work behind it. I can see the calluses and the like, we are going to freaking figure this out, whether it kills us or not. And I think you picked right. Obviously, the second you're, you know, Lauren being the right spouse for you, I think you were a genius without knowing it.
Thanks.
But I also think
She's awesome.
You're also phenomenal because you didn't give up, and you didn't let the things that happened affect, like it affected you because you're not a hard callous person, but you went, I'm going to do this right as much as I can. And for the sake of your kids and your now grandchildren at some point. But so I'm curious, as you guys are navigating marriages, and I mean, you're in the depths, like what does your marriage intensive look like? I'm just curious about that.
Yeah. So when we host the live intensives, it's a 6-week long live course.
Okay.
We're actually in the middle of running one right now, and we've got about 55 couples that are in there in that space. It's it's a Zoom course, but we'll do 6 weeks of live teaching and Q&A, and then there's activations in the middle. You know, we're finding that anybody that's been married for, say, anytime past the honeymoon phase. So if you're like 2-3 years into marriage, all the way up to, I think we have some couples in there that have been married for 20, 25 years. Okay. If you don't know what you're aiming for, then you form really terrible habits inside of marriage that just tear your connection apart when stakes get high and when stress gets high. And so what we love to do is help couples come in and actually break it down and give them a perspective to see their marriage by that helps them protect connection at all costs and build it back when it's broken. And so that's what our course is about, really, in a bunch of different, 6 or so different categories that we kind of feel like make up the pillars of a healthy marriage. And walking with couples to help kind of rebuild where foundations have gotten weird and cracked.
Do you think that it's very common where people, like, I love how you said it's bad habits that turn into lifestyles that turn into dread or whatever, but is it pretty common, the same habits that people have, or are they very different?
I would say the thing is about marriage is if you have a really hard marriage, the chances are you were never taught a good skill set to do marriage well. And because most of marriage is just a lot of skill set. It's 2 people, right? Like, so the misconception that people have before marriage is that it's going to solve a lot of my problems, or it's going to be like marriage is going to be this box full of joy.
It'll be so fulfilling.
Yeah, happiness and sexual fulfillment and that type of stuff. And then when you get married, right, you spend all this time together in any pain point, any place that you are weak, where you need to be strong, anything that you haven't solved that was a pain point for you now just gets magnified because it not only bothers you, but it bothers her as well. And so a lot of people didn't grow up watching their parents live a life that they want to model.
Yeah.
So if I ask a
Replicate.
question in our marriage intensive, like how many of your parents had a marriage that you want to replicate? It would be like maybe an eighth of the room would raise their hands. So we're all growing up in homes watching something happen that actually isn't really setting us up for success, if you think about it.
Yeah.
So then whether or not you want to, you pretty much go back to what your home life was like, the skill sets that you saw, the examples that you saw, that becomes your normal, whether you like it or not. And so inside of marriage, you have to learn the things that you ran from your whole entire life. Like you have to learn how to do emotion-based communication, because that's where the connection comes from. You have to learn how to do conflict really well. You have to learn how to talk about yourself instead of blame somebody else so that they can hear you, and take ownership of your own life and your own story and, the pain points in your life. You got to make amends and work through pain. And so honestly, I feel like the last year and a half, I've seen more breakthrough in marriage than I've seen my whole entire life. And part of it is, for me, is changing the way that I've approached and seen married couples, and made it much more simple than we think so much in terms of, I have to find the right one, or I have to, like, not even just in the world, the soulmate thing, but like we think a lot about chemistry. Like, do you guys have really great chemistry?
Culture.
Yeah,
So much about
absolutely.
chemistry. Instead of really thinking about how do I build a relationship that's built on consistency, that's built on trust, that is free of like useless anxiety, I would say, that is not loaded with pain. And so something as simple as asking a couple. I had a married couple a few weeks ago that I started a counseling appointment with them. And the first thing they said to me is, we decided last night we're going to get a divorce. That's a really crazy place to start
Right.
a counseling appointment.
Yes, it is.
And
So is it like talk us out of it, kind of?
honestly, they weren't even like that. She said, I'm really sorry. We kept the appointment, but we just decided we were going to get a divorce last night. And I was like, wow, gosh, you guys, I'm so sorry. That sounds really painful. Tell me what's going on. There was no affair. There's no infidelity. He's not looking at pornography. Neither is she. Come to find out, like, they just have a lot of pain and no one ever taught them how to work through pain.
Yeah.
So something as simple as that, which for me, I say simple because we all have pain.
Yeah.
Every single human has pain. You've been married 20 years. There's a lot of pain mixed into your story, like everybody. After talking to them for 50 minutes, I went, hey, you guys actually don't hate your marriage. You just don't have a process for dealing with pain. I started to explain to them how to deal with pain and, and just put it in a picture that they could see their whole story in a picture. Like, this is why you're really experiencing lots of pain. This is why you're really miserable inside of your marriage. And they both went, oh yeah, no, we want our marriage. People want their marriage.
Yeah.
They just don't want the
don't wanna live in
dysfunction
pain.
and they don't know how to solve it.
And we tell people too, it's funny, like, we talk about, part of it is just looking at your marriage from the perspective of, like, what does covenant actually mean?
Yeah.
Like, what is a covenant? It's not a contract, and you're not in it for what you can get. And so if you change the paradigm that you're looking at your marriage by, and you determine, I'm not asking the questions, do we have the chemistry that it's going to take to make it to the end? I'm asking questions like, do I know how to be a really great partner in life? Do I know how to be a good partner? Does my husband even know how to win with me in this partnership, or vice versa? Then you start realizing, like, okay, once we have the right mindset about marriage, then typically people are using the tools in their tool belt that they were given to them at age 5 in kindergarten. Yeah. Like the tool of, what do I do if I get my feelings hurt at school? What do I do if somebody pushes me around? What do I do if I don't get what I want in my lunchbox? Like, you're using the skill set that you developed when you first needed conflict resolution skills, and you haven't upgraded your tools.
So good.
And so with the right mindset and really good, helpful tools that adults can use with one another when their goals are the same, which is to protect our connection, then people honestly achieve like wild growth in their marriage, and they get hopeful again. But a lot of it, I would say, you asked a question about like, are there a lot of common underlying problems in marriage?
Answer your question.
No, I think you did, because people just don't.
Well, I think chief among them is people being able to recognize, validate, and communicate their own needs and expectations.
So recognize, validate, and then communicate.
And communicate their
Excellent.
needs and expectations in marriage. Because if you can't do that, then you don't have a way to win with each other.
And I liked how you said that. I think the idea of I don't know how to win with them, I feel like that is a marital thing. Like, I don't know how to win with you. I do this and it's not enough. I don't do this and you pick it out. So is that just a female thing, or do you feel like that's with both sides?
I think it's both.
Well, I think it's both. Yeah. Especially men are most often really disconnected from their emotions, and they go to either joy or anger. They have two emotions, right? I feel tons of joy, or I feel lots of anger. So anger could be their sadness looks like anger. Their shame looks like anger. Loneliness looks like anger. And then women, I mean, you could speak for women.
Well, I just think that if we're talking in like, typical scenarios, women would be more apt to find a whole bunch of coping mechanisms when they feel alone, or they feel afraid, or they feel like their husband isn't there, like really there with them. Then we form a whole bunch of crazy coping mechanisms, and we flood our husbands with information and content, and
it's the best.
We get in there and get all self-sufficient, and we try to be the hero of the home, or I'm going to step in and lead this because obviously he can't, and that just creates a whole bunch of mistrust and pain. And so I think that there's a lot of very typical problems. Like we always say, like, people think that their marriage is so bad off, and we're always like, oh, there's like zero creative problems in marriage. Like, you're not actually unique in your marriage issues. This is not unique. It might show up a little bit of a different way than maybe your friend, but at the end of the day, men and women both typically need and want the same few things.
Can I say something though? I think the biggest issue in marriage is that most marriages are on empty, and they try to work through every problem completely disconnected and without any reserve in their bank account. And so,
and what do you mean by, because I can imagine men are going, she doesn't have sex with me. My bank account's on empty. Or she's saying, he never dates me. He's not romantic with me. So what do you mean by bank account?
Yeah. So
what is the currency of that?
Well, every couple has an emotional bank account. Okay. And it's just like your own checking account, like your actual physical one. It's never the same. Like, you and Ben went to bed, you woke up this morning, and somehow you spent money. Maybe your Netflix bill came out, but it's always fluctuating. And so if you don't really think about it ever, and you don't invest into your bank account, then you probably don't have any money in there. Our physical bank accounts, we think about it a lot. Yeah. Because it's if you don't have money in there, you can't buy food, right? You can't buy gas. And so we really do. We think about it a lot. But our emotional bank accounts, we don't hardly ever think about it. And the beautiful thing about them is it's free. All you have to do is be really thoughtful to actually fill it up. So I can turn towards Lauren, and I can make sure that I am intentional about putting something from me to her that says, I see you, I know you, I care for you, you're important to me. And she can do the same. And so
our currency is our interactions.
Yeah. Yeah. And so to me, like, turning towards one another and being intentional to send a message that says, I really value you, I care for you. Being able to do that consistently on a regular basis. To me, most couples do withdrawals all day long. I mean, if you think about it, like, that happens, I mean, just in the morning time.
Typically, if you're going on default mode, then most of your interactions will be withdrawals. Yeah. Because human nature is, I have to get what I need and want in the day to, like, get from point A to point B. So the intentionality is required if you're going to put anything in. And so if you're talking like statistics, where do the statistics come from that say this? But it's like 3 to 1.
You need a 5 to 1.
5 to 1 ratio.
Yeah. So
the
Gottman Institute is the foremost institute on the science behind marriage and relationships. So John Gottman would say that you need 5 positives to actually make up for 1 negative in a relationship. And you see it if you really think about it. Yep. So when you and Ben have a conflict and that's what starts your morning, it really does take that, hey babe, I love you, I care for you.
5 times the work to get back to feeling connected.
Just to get back to a place of connection. So for us, I think when I'm looking at marriages, I'm watching people try to do high level conflict, high level communication, problem solving, talking about the kids, and they don't ever think about, are we actually connected? Is there anything in the bank account?
Do I feel cared for by you? Yeah, it's like in our emotional bank account, have we poured enough care, consideration, connection, affection, respect? Like is our emotional bank account big enough to withstand the types of hard things we're trying to navigate together?
Like a game changer would be set an alarm on your phone, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, that says, have I turned towards my wife? Have I filled up my relationship? Have I sent the message, I care for you, I love you, I know you, I see you? If you do that, and if she does that to me, then we have something to pull from, right? We have these reserves, and it's free. So I can say to Lauren in the morning, hey, thank you so much this morning for when I was at work, when I went to work out this morning, like you covered the house. Yeah. You're amazing. And you woke up this morning at 4:30 to work on a book that you're writing. Like, I'm so proud of you. So proud of you. She's smiling because it does something to her. I am filling up and sending this message. Now, I could also say, hey, it would have been really great if you would have, if you'd have made breakfast for me when I came home. Or there's all these things that I can. Right. But the thing is like, if I start to focus on putting my effort, my energy, my attention to what she is doing and connecting with her, it's a complete game changer. Yeah. I've actually started to come into marriages that are really, really struggling and saying, we'll deal with the pain and the hurt later. You don't actually have anything to pull from. Yeah. So you don't have any emotional connection. There's nothing in the emotional bank account. So before I even try and solve problems, all I want you to do for a week is turn towards one another.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is it's very much just, even when I had postpartum depression recovery, she said, I want you to get a good night's sleep for a week before we ever talk about one thing. Yep. And I do agree with that. When you're in crisis, you want to fix this. You go read the book, you tell your spouse what podcast you listen to. So I'm curious, do you guys feel like these habits? So I guess my brain always goes to, what about the person that says, my spouse doesn't want to work on it? Because, and again, I don't always want to paint it like not everyone has that. And sometimes we always focus on the crisis, but I do think there are those that are like, I feel like all I do is turn towards my spouse and my spouse is checked out. What do I do? Do you have a sit down? Do you say, hey, this isn't working? Is it time to say this isn't working?
You want me to answer that?
The first thing that I would say is a lot of times when people get to that point, they haven't actually gone through the journey of setting clear boundaries with their spouse. Like people often will sit in misery for years, disconnected, because they actually don't know how to navigate their everyday pressure-filled lives and have connection with their spouse at the same time. And maybe it is because the husband or the wife is actually like pretty checked out, disconnected to themselves usually, and their spouse and their family. And all the trying spouse does is try to get them to engage. Could you please? Could you not? And
is there a martyr part to them too, of like, I'm the one that's laying my life down for our family?
Sometimes I think so. Sometimes I think so, but typically it's just that people feel so powerless to change that they just start giving up. And so the sitting spouse is just feeling so powerless to be good enough, do good enough, be enough for his family, her family, that they just kind of start giving up because it's horrible to feel powerless. But usually the doing spouse hasn't actually set real boundaries before. And so I without knowing anybody's specific situation, I think what we would probably do is walk somebody through how to set clear boundaries in their marriage so that connection is required.
So let's do an example of that. Like, because I love that. The word boundaries always feels like, I'm a boundary girl, but I'm curious, boundaries can almost sound parental.
Yeah.
So I want to know, how does that person go?
Yeah.
What does that look like?
Yeah.
Give me an example.
So I mean, if I'm going to talk about myself, I mean, you can chime in here, but this is what I would say is the simple message is, I want to be in a marriage where I feel connected to my spouse. Mm-hmm. I need to feel connected. I would like to know if that's what you want as well. Do you want to be in a connected marriage? If so, I need to feel like we're working on this together. And then Genius Jay would come in with some great ideas about how to actually lay out the need for change and what does it actually look like to move forward. If you've been in a marriage for a long time where that's not what you've been doing, then you're going to need some outside help. Yeah, you're going to need some outside input.
Yeah. So I think a
really
lot
making the plan.
When you see someone that doesn't want to participate in the relationship, I think that how you start that conversation really will decide how it ends. And so I think one, having a great vision for what you want in a marriage and where it's going and what you want your partnership to look like. So I think a lot of people don't participate because they feel tons of shame and guilt and anger and frustration. Mm-hmm. So what Lauren was saying about starting in and saying, hey, I really want a marriage that is beautiful. And I know we haven't been able to do that on our own. And I've probably caused you a lot of pain, and I'm feeling a lot of pain, and you probably hate this as much as I hate it. I don't want the next 10 years to look like this. What if we invested in having someone come in and help us do what we couldn't do before? Right. So I
want to pause, because what you just did is you put it on you.
Yeah.
Which I think is really emotional intelligence, which I was not taught this. So you just said, I know I'm in pain. I'm sure you are. I don't want to live like this. I'm sure you don't. Right. So is that kind of the empathetic?
Yeah. I think that you have to, you're appealing to somebody and drawing them into, we either do this forever or we can do this forever. What isn't going to work is, again, you're not going to shame your partner into change.
No, or threaten them.
You're not going to threaten your partner into change.
We're going to get divorced if you don't do this.
Yeah. You're going to probably compel, inspire something different. And if you could fix your marriage on your own, you'd have already done it.
It's true.
Right.
So, if you're 5
Nobody
years
wants
in,
to be in a
10 years
miserable
in,
marriage.
and you've been doing this forever, that's where it's like, no, reach out and get the best help that you can. Mm-hmm. How you start that. So even with the boundaries, I think your boundaries are supposed to create and protect your relationship. They're not supposed to keep people out. Yeah. So I think when we're setting boundaries with our spouse, it's an invitation into something better. It's not a, hey, I'm really tired of your crappy attitude. Right. I'm not going to do this anymore.
Right.
Yeah.
That's how boundaries typically get presented.
Yes.
Right.
And it's like, okay, well, I also don't like your attitude either. And so
I'll
I'm going to
see
go
your
do
attitude
this.
and raise it.
Yeah.
And then you end up in a relationship, in a marriage that sucks.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the setting a boundary piece looks like, I want to build this thing. I want to take responsibility for the places that I've sucked in this marriage. Mm-hmm. I'm also in a lot of pain too. You're probably in that. What if we invested our time, effort, and energy into doing this thing? Maybe it's our marriage intensive, or maybe it's whatever, the goblin stuff, or it doesn't really matter.
Counseling.
Yeah, some counseling. And we just started by owning our own part. Mm-hmm. Would you be willing to do that with me? If he's like, or she's like, I'm unwilling to do that, then I guess you're going to have to, at some point, what I tell couples to do is go to counseling yourself.
Yeah.
Because by becoming powerful, and not powerful to kick somebody out, by being able to own your own stuff and own your own story, it helps me to decide what my next steps are.
Right.
A marriage is two people. It's two people working on it. So really there's no marriage if there's only one person.
Right.
But you can't blame it on the other person if you're not doing the work.
It's shocking how many women I know in my close circle that will not go unless their spouse goes. It is shocking to me, only because I think in their brain they don't want to separate each other. Like, why don't we separate? I mean, we both want to work on a marriage. So even that core concept of actually you're allowed to, I think about my own life, getting counseling on my own for a year and a half, and then changed my marriage.
Yeah.
My husband never stepped foot. Now he did after, because he saw the change.
Yep.
Right.
So he went, oh my gosh, that works. I'm in. because he
Right.
saw I was kinder. I was more encouraging. I was more forgiving. I was more willing to change my family patterns. There were things that I didn't know. So he was very quick to join after, but it took me changing.
Sure.
So I just think there are people that are listening that think we got to go together. And I'm like, pause. Maybe you should do it separately for a little bit.
Yeah, your vows weren't, I'll do it if you do it. Your vows that you made, not just to your spouse, but to God, was if for better or for worse, in sickness and health. And I just look at like somebody who is unwilling to do it as they're in that sick portion.
Unwell.
They're unwell.
Hurting.
That's a really good point emotionally.
There's something that happens when one person has a very high skill set and is able to stick into a conversation, is able to do conflict really well, isn't matching the energy. It's what parenting is. Your kids are all over the place and you're not matching them. And so eventually the relationship gets better over time, doesn't it? Because you're going, hey, it sounds like this is really hard for you. Hey, it sounds like you're having a rough morning. Hey, it sounds like, could you say that in a way that is different? I'd love to hear what you're having to say. I'm having a really hard time right now.
Yeah.
That works for kids. It also works in marriage. So,
That's really good.
Ben can be really out of control, or Lauren can. Lauren can be really out of control.
Ben can too.
Yeah.
We can
I just realized he's not
has
here.
some
He's not here to
similarities.
defend
He's
himself.
in the room, so
Okay.
we're okay.
He can be having a really, really hard time, and he could be taking you down that same cycle that you guys have done for years, and you could say, "Hey, I actually really love to hear what's going on in you and the pain. I can't hear when you're just blaming me.
Yeah.
Can you start over and just talk about you, and I'll listen to it." Because if you have a skill set, then you're able to manage the pain that you have, but also the whole conversation and lead it to a completely different place. Now you go, well, I don't want to have to do that forever. Nobody wants to have to do that forever. But all of a sudden it puts you in a really powerful place to have conversations that you've never had before, and them to feel heard and seen and known like they've never felt heard, seen, and known before. And you can't ask them to do something for you that you're not able to do for them.
Yeah.
So it's a complete game changer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I really love that idea of like just to go back a little, because you're saying that things you learned were early on, which I think in my marriage, I absolutely learned my mom and dad's dynamic. When my mom was mad, she disappeared, right? When my dad would, and they'll admit this isn't like shaming them, but my dad would grovel until she would, because my mom was never mad. She was easy to be with. So if mom was mad, everybody wasn't like, you better cry and plead.
Everybody else is wrong.
Oh, sackcloth and ashes. Like you did something serious. But I watched this cycle where I think in even our marriage, I watched myself do automatic things that no one taught me how to do. And I was sabotaging my marriage because I was mimicking my mother. I was mimicking my father. And I had no idea.
Yeah.
And then I would say, well, this is how you do it. And not even realize that this is how you do it was because it was my level of this is how you do it,
100%.
right? So it's very fascinating. Today I was thinking, we were getting up this morning and Ben was up really late doing taxes last night, and I knew he was up late, and I got up and I'm like, you know what? I think I'm gonna take the boys to school. And he usually does their like morning routine.
Yes.
And he goes, no, I'll do it. And there was this little bit of like I would much rather not take the boys to school. Like I'll take my time. But I thought, I know what today looks like. And so I know if I take him to school, he'll have an extra 40 minutes to get a cup of coffee.
That's right.
And to start his day.
Yep.
And as a woman of 20 years in, I'm like, okay, this is going to matter. It doesn't feel like it matters. It's not like a date night, right? It's not like a long, sexy text message. It's just but I knew I'm just depositing that because today I'm probably going to need a few things from him.
Yep.
So it's almost like being intelligent in our relationships, not manipulative, but intelligent.
Yeah.
And I really love that.
Yeah.
So let me ask you, and I think it's really interesting as you guys get into marriage, people learn these skills, they start to practice, they start to function as a healthy couple. Do you think though that couples tend to have hard seasons even if they're using all these skills? Like I heard this thing online recently that was like, you kind of like don't like your spouse for 6 weeks. Every once in a while, it's like 6 weeks you don't like them, and then you come back and you reach, and it's right. Like we all laugh because we're married. You're like, it's true. There's like 6 weeks within a season where you're like, I'll put up with you. Like you're okay, right? And then all of a sudden when it's real, then it gets really good again. And you're like, this is really, and marriage is kind of like that. Is that because it's a skill set or is it just life? That's what I want to know a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting. Isn't it true, just human nature? As a woman, I could feel one way about everything in my life one day and very differently the next. And so I do think that partly to be human is to be on an ever-changing ride of emotions and life circumstances. I mean, there's so little outside of our control.
Yeah.
There's so little
In our
Inside.
control.
in our control. And most of our lives, right? Like the only thing actually that I can control in my relationship with Jay is my end of our connection. That's the only
Isn't that
thing.
annoying. That's so
Yeah,
annoying.
it's
The
true.
only thing, literally.
true.
I mean, I'm not in control of what happens to my kids today.
Yeah.
I don't know what's going to happen, globally, financially. We have no idea. The only thing I can control is our connection. So, yeah, I mean, I just think when you've been married long enough and you go through some of those cycles of ups and downs, or man, like whether it's busyness or circumstances
Babies.
or
I mean,
babies,
yes.
seasons of life, like massive, I mean, honestly, just biological
Yes.
things that
Yes.
change in our bodies. There are waves and seasons and things ebb and flow. And the great news is, like, when you stick married long enough, you realize that you actually don't need circumstances to be perfect in order to have a great marriage.
really good.
And so even,
Which is
you know,
super empowering.
it
Yeah.
is. And, like we have a lot of grace for each other. Jay, I would say the last, starting in 2020, I mean, who can't say this about the last 5 years, but starting in 2020, we went through a massive transition in our family
Yep.
where we had a baby and then another one.
I'm like, we
My
have two.
mother was diagnosed with and passed away from terminal cancer. Jason started a men's nonprofit. And so in many ways, we've been doing a new thing for like the
Yeah.
last 4 years.
The heart
And
is where
so-
you build confidence.
Yeah, but I guess my point is, we've been married long enough now that I can have a ton of grace for him in a season, knowing, oh, he's building a nonprofit. He's never done this thing before.
Yeah.
Like that he's frazzled or stressed or tired or overwhelmed at times makes a lot of sense to me. And I have grace for that because I know, because of our history, that after he gets some of this under his
Yeah.
belt, he's actually going to emerge with like a new confidence and a new strength and
Yeah.
like a bigger capacity than before. And he trusts the same with me.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas in the early years of marriage, you hit one of those first hard spots and you're like,
Mm-hmm.
oh my God, is this what it's going to be like forever? Like I didn't know that I was signing up to do a hard time with that guy. Like that,
For a year.
that
or 2
doesn't
years.
look
No.
like what I signed up for. So I do think that when we get great at building good connection with each other, there's so much more grace for when the other things ebb and flow.
Yeah, it's like that aerial view. Like when Ben and I
Yeah.
are really having a hard time, and I'll notice he gets, this is more hard for him, but I'll go into the let's get way up here and let's look at like mom passed away. We had 2 kids back to back.
Totally.
We had a pandemic.
Yes.
We had
Exactly.
I mean, when you really start to give yourself compassion about what you're trying to pull off in your life,
Yeah.
people don't do that. They're
Yeah.
so hard on themselves versus like, this is really hard. And you're not a wimp and
Yeah.
you're not broken.
Totally.
Life is tough and you're going to be okay. I want to say this, again, thank you for being here. Your marriage intensive is happening right now, but people
Yeah.
can join the wait list, I assume. Will
Yeah.
you do another one this year?
There is a
Yeah.
wait list. We'll do one in the fall. And we're actually in the process of, people can or can't do live events.
Yeah.
And so we're in the process of developing and releasing something that people can do more at their own pace. And so we're
Good.
hoping that comes this spring. And that will be great too.
And also, if you have a church and you do marriage moments and retreats and conferences, Lauren and Jay are fantastic for that. And so again, I know they have busy schedules and they've got a lot going on, but if something you think like, gosh, I love this, I want more of this. A lot of times Ben and I will be invited to do things, and truthfully, it's not our number one lane, but this is the lane for them. And so if that's something you're thinking about wherever you're watching, consider it. And we'll leave all those stuff in the show notes so you can find that. Of course, we have Brave Co., which is a
Yep.
powerful men's nonprofit organization for men and raising up. And my husband and boys went to the Brave Co. conference that happens every June, and
Yep.
the rite of passage for men. I mean, historic in our house,
Yeah.
like the biggest deal. My dad was there. It's just so powerful. So if you're looking for a masculine moment as a man, it's not just sitting in a church and worshiping for 5 days. It really is like outdoors. There's games. It's great, but it's not just also beat a drum and be shirtless. There is some really great heart moments too. So
It's true.
it's just a good mix of both. But ultimately, I just want to thank you guys for being here and everything that you guys do. thank you for the journey. Thank you for the sacrifice. Like it makes me emotional because I know you fought to be here, and it just sounds so easy to say, yeah, you just do this, you do this. And I'm like, they don't even know this, the hardcore desire to do this right that you guys have. So thank you for being here. I love you guys as friends, but I also love that your voice is out there. And so those of you that are watching, I want to thank you for being here. And we're going to continue to hit our month of marriage in the month of March. And I'm going to be in Pennsylvania. So if you are in Pennsylvania and you're like, Havilah, where are you next? I'm actually going to be in Summit Church, Indiana, Pennsylvania on March 28th, 29th. I'll be there. So if you would like to join me, or if you're in driving distance, come see me. All those details, again, are in the show notes, or on my website at havilahcunnington.com. This has been a great conversation. And if you still have conversations and questions about marriage, there's still time. Throw it in the comments below. Thanks for being here, and we'll see you next time.